Hey everybody, it's Dave here, and if we got a treat for you, it's Thirsty Thursday on Vikings Happy Hour, and we've got a special guest. When Ryan Longwell wants to talk, we listen, and he's going to be on next. So stay tuned. Welcome to Vikings Happy Hour, where we mix our favorite beverage and talk of your Minnesota Vikings. Skol!
Hello and welcome to this special edition of Vikings Happy Hour, sponsored by Lake Monster Brewing and That's Badass Wood Art. You can head over and get 20% off any one item from that'sbadasswoodart.com. And today, we are joined by former kicker Ryan Longwell, third all-time in Vikings history for points. How are you, sir? How's retirement?
I'm doing well. Retirement's been great. Been busy. We have both kids in college now, so Sarah and I kind of looked at each other and said, "What do we do now?" So it's been fun. It's been fun following the kids around and fun just kind of helping out. And I kind of mentioned earlier that been helping out some college kids, kicking and snapping and punting and stuff. So just doing that on my free time and trying to keep the golf game in shape.
Have you thought about coming up here? Because I feel like ever since you left, we can't get our kicking situation figured out. Greg Joseph is kind of, he's had a rough couple games. Have you talked to him or anybody in the Vikings organization?
So I haven't, other than, Rob Brzezinski and a few guys. I mean, most of the guys that when I was there are now moved on. But, I always say we're kind of, full circle yet again. The reason that the Packers, my career was there, and then the reason the Vikes came after me when I was done there was because the Vikes had, I think it was 4 or 5 kickers in the previous year and a half. And so it was basically like, come solidify the position. And so that's, what, we didn't make them all. But I felt we were pretty good for 6 years, and philosophically, once again, for those 6 years, it was me, it was Chris Kluwe, and it was Colin Leffler. So love them or hate them, we had one snapper, we had one punter, and we had one holder. And so by the end of, year one, of training camp, like we were in a pretty good groove. And then the groove just keeps getting better and better and better. And so all that means is it doesn't mean like your best gets better, but your B-ball, the one that days you're not feeling it, the day that the snap gets back a little later, those go through when you're used to each other, for that long. So, I felt like we were pretty solid for 6 years. And then obviously, Blair had his struggles, and then it's just kind of been the same thing with the snapping and the holding and the switching punters and the switching kickers, that you kind of have this revolving door where, nobody likes to talk about it, but I always say, the Packers for the last 3 decades have had Chris Jackie, myself, and Mason Crosby. Now, Jackie, myself, and Crosby have not been perfect all year, every year for those times. But over the long haul, we've been pretty steady. And so it's kind of like the known quantity is better than the hot hand. And I think it's just a philosophical thing that what we were brought to Minnesota to do, we did, and then they went away from it, a little too quickly.
Well, so I was going to bring that up to you because, you talk about the stability at some of those special teams positions, and the Vikings did move on from Jordan Berry, who was Greg Joseph's holder last year. Now it's Ryan Wright, who's a rookie, right? I don't know if he has any holding experience. Do you think that maybe that's playing into a factor of, why he's 64% this year from field goals?
Well, I'll tell you why it's a factor. And you got to kind of look a little deeper in the numbers is that, yes, he's 64%, and yes, he's missed a few extra points, but he's perfect inside 50, right? And so
Mm-hmm.
the hold comes down to when you're long range. When you're back there and you've got to hit the perfect ball to get it through, that's when the little nuances of a new holder or a young holder, an inexperienced holder, become a huge deal. And so, he's missed from 56 a few times, but he's also had a few blocks. So I don't know protection wise. I mean, I haven't studied the film or anything, so I don't know protection wise if there were flaws in the protection. But to me, when you look at the stats and you look at what's going on, long range field goals tells me there's operational issues or trust issues there, and blocked kicks lead me to believe that there's holds getting down late and or spun late. And so I know, the snapper is the repeat snapper from last year, but he only snapped 7 games last year. So,
Mm-hmm.
we got to make kicks. I mean, there's no question. That's the job title. However, Greg's been through a revolving door of snappers and holders, and it's tough. I'm just telling you, it's tough when you do that, and then you add the pressure of what the job title actually is. And the job title of a kicker, no matter if you're Pee-wee or in the NFL, is A or F. There's no C grades. You either pass or you fail. And that's the name of the game. And so when you amp that pressure up and you have these revolving, parts, it just becomes tough to trust it when you need it most. And you need it most under pressure, and you need it most from long range.
How much of the kicking process is it's obviously a body mechanics type swing. Like in golf, you can tweak certain things. You can draw back inside to hit a hook or do whatever. How much of that is involved in kicking, the whole snapping, get the ball, spin, kick, and one little bit, a tweak on one little bit can fix it or break it?
Yeah, it's really there's so many moving parts, and I always joke there's no such thing as a chip shot, but there's so many moving parts. So you have 1.27 seconds from snap to hold to kick to get that ball off. If you get to 1.3233, it's probably blocked. And if you go faster than that, if you go to 1.2, 1.22, everything's happening too fast to get it right. Meaning if the laces come back at 9 o'clock, it's too quick to get it to 12 o'clock and the foot's coming through too quick. So there's a sweet spot that you've got to be able to know the trust. Yes. Do the snap need to get it back there at 12 o'clock? Yes. Does the hold need to get on the spot and lean properly with the laces forward? Yes. But having said that, it becomes an art to get it all done in the 1.27 seconds where it's not too fast, it's not too slow, everybody's in rhythm. Your ball is your best B ball, we'll call it, because you want to swing at 85, 90%. So your miss hit goes straight. If you're swinging at 100% and the ball comes back at 9 o'clock and the hole gets down just a touch late and the laces get to 12 o'clock just before you hit it, or that it's actually moving a little bit, the ball's not going through if you're swinging at 100%. So, yes, there are guys, I was a guy that eliminated the left miss. I never wanted to see the ball go left. And so I had Kluey and my holders in Green Bay, hold the ball forward and leaned away from me because it was not a cut shot, but the ball was not turning left. There are guys like Adam Vinatieri and those guys that played a little hook through it. He never wanted to see the ball going right. And so there are subtleties to it. But the thing is if I'm aiming that the ball's not going to go left, and Kluey, if he would put the ball down and give me the wrong hold so the ball went left, I'm just telling you, the next time I'm out there aiming, I'm like, where do I aim this thing? Now, Kluey was great. Kluey, we never had that issue after, our mini camps and stuff. But, you look at, just because I know him well, you look at Mason, last year over in Green Bay where they had a rookie holder, and the rookie holder's miss was Mason's kryptonite, which was Mason's a cutter of the ball like I was. And if you lean it into him, that ball's going left and low. And when you're a cutter of the ball, like on the golf course, and you see that ball going left, man, it's a scary thing to go out there next time. And so then you start having a hard time swinging away. And then when you have a hard time swinging away, that's what shows up from 56 and 53 and those longer ones.
Miles, you had a question.
Yeah, I was just going to touch on obviously you said you haven't watched the film of the Vikings, which is totally fair. You got a lot of stuff going on, but have you caught any of the Vikings games this year? And I was just curious, like how often you do watch games, and just to kind of see like your thoughts on Greg Joseph as a kicker, last year into this year, and just kind of your overall thoughts of him and their process.
Well, I thought he was great last year, and I thought his good ball is a very, very good ball. Let me go two routes here. Okay, the first thing is if you watch, I won't consider myself one of the best, but if you watch the best of the best, the Jason Hansons, the Vinatieri's, the Gary Andersons of the world, even Justin Tucker for that matter, the trajectory on those guys is not a really high ball. It's kind of just a touch lower. And it's kind of that 3/4 height. And so we had total control over that height, okay? So there's very few, if any, high ball kickers that last a long time in the NFL. And now, getting really down the rabbit's hole here. Now, when you go to these kicking camps as a high school kid and a college kid, they want the Instagram kick. They want this, let me put it on my social media. And the kick is straight up in the air and it's from 70 yards. And everybody's like, oh my gosh, why isn't that guy kicking in the NFL? Well,
where's Ryan?
Games,
where's Ryan when we need him?
Yeah. You've seen college games just like I have. And none of these guys that translate in kicking in the camps at that 70-yarder through the moon turn up on game day, in college. And so you kind of play that forward. And of those few guys that make it to the league, there's very few guys that last a long time that hit a really high ball. And so, it's kind of one of those things where you got to kind of get the trajectory where it's controllable. And so that's, number one. I thought Greg was great last year. I thought he was great. And for the most part, he's perfect inside 50 this year. So I'm not saying, he's lost it. Now, here's the second thing that I'll go down. I know there's been a regime change, in Minnesota, but Blair Walsh was drafted and had an unbelievable first year. Okay.
Yeah.
And then they got rid of Kluwe. Okay. So they had a new holder after his great first year, and they still had Colin, but you add a new piece of the puzzle, and he wasn't quite as good. Then they replaced Colin the next year, and you add another piece, take it out of the puzzle, and then he wasn't quite as good. And so it's kind of a philosophical thing with the organization that they can't leave well enough alone. Now, I know there's a regime change. I fundamentally disagreed with the approach of the last regime. But when Greg had last year's, great season, I'm like, there we go. Leave it alone. Don't touch it. Sign the snapper, sign the punter. Let's keep this group together for, 5, 6, 7 years. Let's ride it out, and they're going to be good for the long haul. Well, they didn't, right? And so you kind of reap what you sow. And so, unfortunately, I see this Blair Walsh kind of trajectory going again, where you just kicking and snapping and punting are not like the backup linebacker where we have a guy that's worth $850,000. We can get a young guy in for $300,000. It's just not the same. And when does it show up? When you need it most. And 3 points is a huge deal in the NFL nowadays. And so it shows up when you need it most. That's the thing.
Yeah. And with the extra points being moved back too, it's even more important because there's less wiggle room there too, because he's missed a few extra points this year as well.
Yeah, he has. Yeah, and there's just no, I said earlier there's no chip shot, and it's kind of a, I'll admit, I don't know what I would do with the extra point rule now, because there were games that, you just kind of go out and you're just not feeling it. But luckily, the offense drives down, scores a touchdown, and you have that 20-yard extra point to kind of get your groove of the first kick of the day. When that first kick is the 33-yarder, it's just different, And so you can't guide those through anymore like you could from 20. And so that 33, you got to be on your stuff, which means you got to trust the hold, which means you got to trust the snap. And, we all get in funk. So, I don't know if Greg got in a funk or is getting out of it or whatever, but it's certainly, I've always looked at it as an operation. And if you start looking at individual components, you're going to have trouble. You're really going to have trouble.
Well,
I had a quick question. I was just going to, real quick. I was going to ask about warming up, because most kickers, they also do kickoffs. Does that help do you think that helped you, doing kickoffs in any way during a game to help keep your obviously your leg warm, but just like kicking further? I know it's off a tee and that's a little obviously different, but was just curious like how that process works in comparison to like kicking field goals and extra points.
Yeah, so I kicked off every game I played in, and I always felt the big problem is every kick we take live, field goal or extra point wise, is snap, hold, and kick, right? So
Right.
I always felt my philosophy is if I would go out there and warm up off the holder, the little tripod, the sticks or whatever you want to call them, and that wasn't rhythm to me. That was just technical stuff. And the last thing I wanted on game day was technical stuff. So to answer your question, I would use my kickoffs as the rhythm of getting my leg loose, swinging for it. I'd warm up, before the opening kick or at halftime with kind of my field goal approach to a kickoff tee and just kind of getting the rhythm that way where I wasn't trying to actually make the kick. I was just hitting the ball. And I think you get so caught up in, if you go out there with the sticks, of trying to make the kick versus hitting your ball. Hitting your ball is a way better avenue to go. And so I always felt like kickoffs were a great thing because, if you're playing in Lambeau or Soldier Field or something, you also want to see what the ball's doing in the air.
Right.
But at the same time, to me, it's a huge asset in order to get loose and stay loose during the game.
Dave, you had something?
Yeah, I was curious. Is there any way to speed up the process of cementing the three positions, the holder, the kicker, the snapper, to where they do become that solidified unit and everything is that perfect timing every time type of deal?
Well,
Can you do extra reps?
obviously success breeds success, and so, I can just speak for myself, like Colin and Chloe and I love those guys, but I made them go out to practice 30 minutes before everything started. And it was just the three of us on the field. And we hit literally the same exact set of field goals every single day before practice. And my first kick of the day was with a live snap and hold. I never warmed up off the sticks. I would swing my leg, I would stretch, I would get loose and run and everything. But my first kick was out of Chloe's hold. I mean, that was it. And so we would hit the same 20 ball set every single day, going back to 58, but we'd work on each hash, working back. Did the same thing every Wednesday and Thursday for my entire career. And what that was ironically the same set we hit in pregame before the games. And so what game day felt like was nothing bigger or nothing smaller. It just felt like the next time we did the same set. And so you kind of hypnotically get yourself into this groove where the same thing you did on Wednesday is the same thing you did on Thursday, is the same thing you did in pregame. So when you go out there in the first quarter for the 38-yarder, it's just the same routine. And so it was just so important to me. The whole philosophy of my approach was rhythm and routine. Like that was it. It wasn't, chinned here. It wasn't get your ankle locked this way. That wasn't it all. It was rhythm and routine. And so we hypnotized ourselves basically by doing the same set every single time that we would do on pregame. And it showed up on game day that we were pretty consistent. We didn't go faster on game day. We didn't go slower on game day. We just always were the same.
And that proved that you guys had that stability for us for 6 seasons, and it was great. If you had Greg Joseph's ear right now, because I'm sure as a kicker, when you kind of start to miss a little bit, and to your point, right, he's been really good inside 50 yards, but when you can't quite get those 50-yarders, maybe you start getting in your head a little bit. Is there anything that you'd tell Greg Joseph right now if you had his ear?
Yeah, to me, it would be focus on the rhythm. Like focus on the rhythm of your approach. Don't worry about technical stuff. Don't worry about hitting the ball harder. I would say back off to 85, 90%. The thing that most people don't realize is that you have to practice kicking at 85 or 90%. All this home run derby stuff, like I talked about earlier, it's impossible to replicate on game day because everybody forgets on game day you have to add adrenaline to the puzzle. So if you swing at 100% Wednesday and Thursday at practice and you add adrenaline, all of a sudden you're at 100 and whatever percent. You can't control your leg at that speed. So you need to practice at 85 and 90%. And so adrenaline gets you to 90 to 95%. So you're right in the sweet spot of hitting your best, most consistent, cleanest ball with the least amount of effort. And so I think when guys start missing, especially from long range, everything's out of sequence. And so they're swinging too hard, but they're swinging too hard too quick. And so it's kind of like, we always joke, it's not step, step, kick, it's step, step, kick. So there's kind of like a load of the leg before you actually make contact. And I would repeat that phrase to him 8 trillion times if I was next to him. And we would get it pretty quick. And I'll say this other thing. So if I ever felt like I was getting out of sync or in a funk or whatever, my slumps didn't last very long, thank goodness. But I wouldn't watch film of myself. I would watch film of Jason Hansen. And after 2 or 3 kicks of Jason Hansen, he had this thing that he did with his head, kind of his position on the kick that would get me back in sync instantly. And so
interesting.
I think, I think there's a lot of kickers that watch too much film of themselves. I also think there's a lot of coaches that, God forbid I'm saying this, but coaches that don't know what they're talking about, that watch film of their kicker and then say something to their kicker. And 9 times out of 10, the most important thing to say to a kicker is what you don't say. It's not what you do say. And I think a lot of these coaches feel empowered because they've seen a kicker or they've seen 100 kickers or they've coached in a league for 40 years that they feel like they know what it is. And I'm just telling you, unless you've been between the hash marks with the game on the line or your job on the line and your right leg's feeling like jello and you have to hit this kick through, you just don't know what it's like. You just don't, And so that's where it's almost better what you don't say than what you do say. So every coaching, if you want to call it that point, that I would give Greg or I give kickers is always rhythmic and timing and those kind of things. It's never technical stuff.
That makes me, I mean, I've seen it asked a couple times in the chat here. It just brings me to a point of, did you ever approach the last regime about like Carlson and Dan Bailey at all?
I did. So, not to, belabor a point. I mean, I've said this before, so it's not like breaking news.
Yeah.
I watched, I thought Daniel Carlson was the real deal. Okay.
I mean, he is, right?
So did Rick Spielman.
Yeah. So when he was drafted, I watched the Green Bay game. Okay. And back to your golf analogy, Dave, the worst thing you can do on golf is stand on a tee box and have the ball going both ways. And you don't know what to do, right? You don't know where to aim. You don't know where to fix. So I watched Daniel Carlson hit 3 balls to the right in a game. And I'm like, this guy, I got it. Like, I know exactly what he's doing. Like, this is a little nerves. He was crouching a little bit to the ball, which got it started right and going right. But it's a one-way miss. It's one thing. This can get fixed. So I did text the people I know in the front office, and I said, do not abandon ship on this kid. This kid is the real deal. It is extremely fixable. I will be happy to do it. I'll do it under the radar. No one even has to know. I'll talk to the guy or come in. But this is quick fix. And do not abandon ship on this poor kid. And the only response I got was, I think it's too late. Okay. And so obviously they cut him, and look at what he's doing now. I mean, has he ever missed? I don't even know if he's missed. Like, the guy is like
he's right
40
up
in
there.
a row, 50 in a row. Like, it's unbelievable how good he is. And sometimes you got to take a step back to get a couple steps forward. And that Green Bay game was the biggest blessing Daniel Carlson's ever had, because it not that he got out of Viking, right, not that, but that he identified the flaw under pressure, fixed it right away, because it was a simple fix. He just needed help doing it. Mm-hmm. And he was
Did you work with him? Did you work with him after he got cut? Oh, okay.
I didn't. No. So he got. I know we did work with him, and I like his style of coaching, and so he got fixed, and I mean, he's just money in the bank now. He's really, really good. Been amazing. So yeah. So that was that one. I talked to Blair quite a bit when he was going through his struggles, because the whole thing with the Seahawks miss, once again, was kind of what we talked about earlier. I mean, that was a 1-1-8 get off. A 1-1-8 get off in that temperature outside in TCF Stadium. You just have no wiggle room. Like, there's no wiggle room. The ball came back a little low. It wasn't spun right away, and he was on it that fast because he was too quick to the ball. So, a lot of these guys with stopwatches are the worst enemy of actual what works on game day. And so I do think, I reached out for Daniel. Obviously, I lost that battle. and they had to move on from Blair, but they've attempted to fix the problem over the years. But you have to look at it like the three-headed monster, and you have to leave all three of them together once you get a good combo, and with Kai and with the other guys that they've had, they've had interchanging snappers. They switched snappers. Was it last year, the year before, before the season, last week of training camp, which, that fundamentally means every single rep you've taken all off season is all for naught. You just throw it out the door. So, it's not like plugging and playing, a different left tackle or something like that. This is all sequencing on 1.27 seconds. And when you have a new piece to the puzzle, it undermines a little of the rhythm, but a lot of the trust.
As a former holder and then an emergency holder in college, I understand.
Yeah, so it's I was lucky enough that my freshman year at Cal in college, I punted and held. So I know the pressure of getting that ball down quick, and so I'm lucky to say that I did it, because now I know, my holders over the years were great, but I had Doug Peterson, I had Matt Hasselbeck over in Green Bay, had those guys, and then obviously Kluey in Minnesota, and those guys are life and death for my success. If it's not down there perfect, it's not going to go through. There's no mystery to it.
I had a quick question, Ryan. Now that you're talking about holding, did obviously for the longest time backup quarterbacks were the holders. Did you, and then obviously switch to punters? Did you have that experience, going from the usual backup quarterbacks to the punters? And then what was that change like? Now I'm interested in that now. Yeah,
so there was a philosophy change of the punters do it because the punters are around the kicker more often than the snapper, so you can get more reps without having to pull the quarterbacks. Now, in Green Bay, it's not much of a secret that no one was going to beat out number 4 Brett Favre, right? So the way these guys fought to keep their roster spot as the backup quarterback was to be the holder. And so Doug Peterson and Matt Hasselbeck, they went above and beyond whenever we wanted to kick to make sure they were available, because it helped their roster status. It helped solidify them as the backup, and they went above and beyond for us, which we were extremely thankful for.
Too funny.
Did you notice? But is there a true difference though for you, between how the holding was fundamentally?
No, because I think once you teach it properly, it's pretty easy to learn. There are clearly guys with better hands and worse hands, but just because it's a quarterback doesn't mean they have better hands. It's really it's the move of how you catch it in the same spot, so you add the laces or the forward every time. It's not reaching out for it. It's all that. So once you know how to coach it, know how to teach it. I'll be honest with you. Kluey had some of the worst hands I'd ever seen. But Kluey, when he understood how I wanted it caught and put down and everything, he never missed. I think he dropped one in our first game together when we played at the Redskins, now the Commanders. We were playing up in Washington. In the first game we played when I was there, my first attempt, he dropped the PAT. And after that, he never missed one. And so once you learn, the punters can be just as good, if not better, because they're going to be around more, so they can get more reps.
Do you see a value in having a kicking coach on a team in the NFL?
Yeah, 100%. I do, because I don't think special teams includes kicking and punting. I really don't. And I don't think, to defend them, I don't think a special teams coach is required to know kicking and punting. I just think it's a different thing. Now, I will say a lot of us are stubborn in the NFL to know what we know and do what we want to do. But I think an extra set of eyes that knows when not to say something is far more important, to have around than a guy just kind of left on their own and getting bad information. Guys that are left on their own and getting the wrong information, man, it's such a slippery slope before you get to a point where you just have no confidence going out there again. And so the last thing you want is that situation. So I do think there's value in it. I do think it's an important role. And I do think having another set of eyes for the operation, the snap, the hold, and the kick, and, the punt, there's subtleties to it once you've been through the fire that, I could tell a special teams coach 100 times, and he still would not understand it like I understand it.
So I had a couple questions for you. You mentioned Washington in the instance with Chris Cluey kind of dropping the ball there on your hold.
Yep.
We're in Washington this week on
Yes.
Sunday, and I think they're notorious for kind of having like a bad field, right? Is there a difference on kicking between turf and grass, and like how do you approach that in a game? And is this a good game for Joseph to go out there and try and kick a 50-yarder if the field conditions are going to be rainy and crappy?
Yeah, I mean, good grass is always the best surface to kick off of. Now, to your point, where you're going this week does not have good grass. So it's unfortunately it looks really good on camera and it's green and flat and all that stuff, but it's a real heavy sand base. And so it tears up super easy. It leaves divots, after really after pregame, honestly. And so you can get some bad spots to kick from, So as long as he's got good footing with his plant foot, you could make kicks, but if you got to go get one, 55, 56, something like that, it's not the easiest surface to kick off of if your foot doesn't grab. Having said that, sometimes you go to these ice skating rinks and you just kind of forget anything that's going on and you have great days and it gets you back into the groove, So there can be a yin and a yang to the bad field. I know some days you went out in Soldier Field and it was just horrid, and so you kind of just throw your hands up in the air and say, I just pray that you don't get the 52-yarder into the wind from that side of the field that has the mud, and if you do, it's just not your day. But if you get 3 20-yarders downwind, you can get through the day okay. So you just kind of got to take it one at a time and hope you get the good breaks.
Too funny. Well, I don't want to take too much more of your time here, so I'll just leave you with one final question that I'm sure Viking fans all kind of want to know. But what was your favorite memory here in Minnesota?
Well, so let me give you 2 because
okay, I'll take 2. That works.
Yeah, well, one of them only because I saw Jared riding in on his horse last week, and that whole thing. Not so much the 2009 season with Brett and everybody, and going to the NFC Championship, but that locker room was the most fun year of sports I've ever played in my life. I mean, it was just we had the best conglomeration of human beings, whether you're talking about Antoine Woodfield or Jared Allen or Brian Robinson or Favre or the Williams brothers, Shank and all these guys, even Cluey. We had the best collection of people, and we had so much fun that year that Sundays was just kind of like, let's go in the yard and play. I mean, that's kind of what it turned into, and it was so much fun. Obviously, it was fun having Brett, have that year he had, but that was incredible. But I think the one memory, like football kicking wise, I had was we played the Giants in week 17, the last game of the year, and we lined up for that 50-yarder to win the game. And it was when we win the division and go make the playoffs and miss. If I make it, we do that. If I miss, we're out and the season's over. And so there's 8 seconds left, and I line up for the 50-yarder, and Coughlin calls timeout to ice me. Okay, kind of expected it. So I go to reset, and I'm taking my steps again, and then there's another timeout. And I'm like, the rule is you can only call one timeout. And it comes from our sideline, of all things. So Childress had iced me, called timeout, and then called the field goal team off the field, and we bring out the offense, and T-Jack, God rest his soul, throws it out of bounds to burn, 5 more seconds off the clock because we want it to be the last play of the game. So that was that play. Then I go back out to line up for this 50-yarder again, and because it's a new play, Coughlin calls timeout again. So I'm like, this is the worst thing ever,
It's got to be a record.
I mean, I think it is. I've never seen it in my life. And so obviously we stepped it off and lined up and made the kick and won the division, went to the playoffs. But it was the circumstance along with the pressure, alonging to, pat myself on the back, just kind of reloading the process every time, and knowing what was on the line, but also knowing that I trusted myself enough to kind of reset, and then obviously make the kick. So that was interesting, but that was a big kick, and that was a really fun one.
Well, now you made me lie, because I was going to be done there, but I wanted to. You brought up icing the kicker. I mean, you talk about the process of preparing to get up there for a kick. Does icing the kicker truly work, or is it just a kicker by kicker basis?
So here's my philosophy on it. And
then I'll let you go.
No, you're good. I'm good. I'm good on time. I always felt like if we're lining up for a game-winning kick, 99% of the time we have just driven the length of the field, okay, to get there. So I felt like if you call timeout and ice me, it's going to give my linemen a chance to catch their breath, and I'm going to get better protection, so I can take just a click longer to get the ball off. So I always felt like it was an asset to me. And then if we were, obviously my years in Green Bay, or if we were in an outdoor game, it gave me a chance to make sure my plant footing was all solid, that the field was mashed down, that I could get a really good spot for the ball. So for me, I mean, it wasn't like I was hoping for it, but I definitely preferred when they did it, because I got better protection and I got a better spot to kick from. So I never looked at it like the mental side of it, because to me it was just like you just restart the process, kind of like I just talked about. Whether it's the first quarter kick or the game-winning kick, you just go through the same process, and if they ice you just back off and then start the process again. So that's kind of how I looked at icing.
I know kickers now will they'll just proceed with the kick. It's almost like a free kick out there.
So here's the thing about that. Yeah, so here's the thing about that is I always tell guys that I work with, don't ever kick that ball unless it's blowing 40 miles an hour and you got to see what the ball's doing in the air. But if you make that kick on the timeout one and it goes through right center, okay, not dead center, but right center, what's your thought? Your thought is, okay, well, I'm just going to tug this one just a touch more, or maybe aim just a further left on this next one to make sure it goes through, right? Not at all what we want. So our whole program is go out, do it once, and get off the field. And so when you add another data point to what you're doing, it throws what you do normally off. And so, like I said, if you're in Soldier Field, it's blowing 40 miles an hour and you're at 45 yards and you just got to see what the wind is doing, then by all means send it and then look at the ball and see what it's doing in the air so you know how to aim. But don't ever hit that kick. Don't ever do it, because you're just adding more data that you don't need to the next one. I'm
convinced that's the part of the icing that coaches want. They want you to kick it because 100%. They know that they know it's coming back. They
want baggage. Yeah, they want to add baggage to you. And so if you stripe it and hit a perfect ball, now you're like debating, can I do that again? Because that was a good one. But if you miss it, then you're like, oh my gosh. And there's a little more ounce of pressure on you because you just missed the practice kick, right? So it's just, you just don't want any extra data. And so I agree with you. I think the coaches have got it so good now with like the last second timeout that now guys, they got them like hitching a little bit, expecting it. Yeah. And so when they don't call it now, it almost throws guys off a little more than if they do, bang the timeout.
So interesting.
Crazy, right?
Yep. Ryan, is there anything you'd like to report? I saw you've got 4th and Longwell.
Like I said, both kids are in college, and we're having a blast tracking them around. Our daughter's playing tennis in college, so that's been fun. But I'm just having fun, and so I consult with colleges and help their kickers and punters and snappers and specialists kind of do what we've just talked about, today on just get them a chance to have a chance. There's so many colleges that, the coaching points, if you want to call them that, are just get the ball down or just get the ball off or just hit it higher. And well, that's great. But, how do you get the ball off faster if the ball's not there? And how do you hit it higher if the ball's leaned sideways and the laces are, the wrong way? So I like to give guys a chance to have a chance. So I've been doing that. And that's kind of the 4th and Longwell thing was just a kind of a quirky name, but I've been doing that and having a blast doing it. So I feel like I was beyond blessed to do what I did for a living, and I don't know if I was good, bad, or indifferent, but I felt like I had a pretty good handle on how to handle it, the mental and the physical side of it. And so I feel like it's my duty, gift, whatever you want to call it, to give back to these kids. And, I do talk to a couple NFL guys and kind of consult them a little bit, help them out a little bit. But I just feel like for what I did for a living, it's the least thing I can do is to give back to these kids, to give someone else a chance to be in, my shoes in the future.
Well, I can tell you, as Vikings fans, we're traumatized by kickers over our history.
I do know that.
But you were one that we did not worry about. And that's got to be the greatest compliment we can give.
I felt like we would have made the New Orleans kick. I felt like we were pretty good there.
We knew that was going to happen.
To prove it, but I felt like we would have put a pretty good hit on that one and put it through. So unfortunately, we'll never know, but I appreciate that. That's the ultimate compliment is that we just never worried when you ran on the field, right? And I think between Cullen and Cluey and myself, we had a pretty efficient operation doing that.
Absolutely. Well, I want to thank you so much for hopping on. We truly appreciate it, giving your insight and your knowledge and sharing that. We'll have to, when the offseason rolls around and maybe draft time, I don't know if you follow any draft prospects, but maybe we'll get you on and chat about some of the kickers that might be coming out.
Love to. Yeah, I follow it pretty close because obviously I like to know who's
working with those kids.
But let me know, and then I'm available, and I appreciate you reaching out. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you. For everybody that joined us today in the chat, head on over to our YouTube channel, Climb in the Pocket, and like and subscribe. We will be back for Vikings Happy Hour next Wednesday night at 8 p.m. Until then, everybody, Skol Vikings.
Skol Vikings! Like, subscribe, and ring the bell, and feel free to rate us on your favorite aggregator. A big shout-out goes to our partners, The Daily Norseman, where the best Vikings content can be found. To That's Badass Wood Art, when you're looking for something unique to brighten your space. And to Lake Monster Brewing, home of the best beer in Minnesota. Skol, everybody!